General Hospital. Shocker, Willow's dark desperation leads to hospital murder attempt. Scout's scream exposes everything. The walls of General Hospital have witnessed countless dramatic moments over the decades. But nothing could prepare Port Charles for the chilling events that unfolded when Willow Tate crossed a line from which there is no return. What began as a desperate act of self-preservation has spiraled into a full-blown murder attempt that will leave the community reeling, and one family shattered beyond repair. The poison that started it all. Willow had already made her first move against Drew Kane, successfully poisoning him with a substance that left him hospitalized with a devastating stroke. The injection she administered had done its job. Drew lay in a hospital bed facing the terrifying possibility of locked-in syndrome, unable to move or communicate effectively. For most people, this would have been enough. Drew was incapacitated, silenced, seemingly no longer a threat, but for Willow it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. As Drew lay in that hospital bed fighting for every breath and struggling with the aftermath of the massive stroke, Willow's mind raced with a single, haunting possibility. What if he recovers? What if his speech returns? What if he can expose what she did to him? The acquittal from shooting Drew had been a close call, a stroke of luck she couldn't count on twice. This time there would be no courtroom drama, no lawyer to defend her actions. If Drew regained the ability to speak and pointed his finger at her, Willow knew her life would be over. The fear consumed her. Every moment Drew remained alive was a moment closer to her exposure. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think straight. All she could see was Drew's eyes opening his mouth, forming words, his finger pointing directly at her as he revealed the truth to the world. A decision made in darkness. Willow made her choice. Drew couldn't be allowed to recover. He couldn't be given the chance to tell anyone what she had done. The only way to guarantee her safety, to protect herself from the consequences of her actions, was to ensure Drew never spoke again. Permanently, the plan formed in her mind with a cold, calculated precision that would have shocked anyone who knew the old Willow, the kind, compassionate nurse who cared deeply about healing people. But that Willow was gone, replaced by someone willing to do whatever it took to survive, no matter the cost. She would do it in the hospital itself. It was bold, even reckless, but it also made a certain twisted sense. As a nurse, she had access to medications, to supplies to Drew's room without raising immediate suspicion. She knew the hospital's rhythms when the hallways were quiet, when the nursing stations were understaffed. She could slip into Drew's room during one of those quiet moments, administer the fatal injection, and slip out before anyone noticed. It would look like a complication from his stroke, a tragic turn in an already devastating medical crisis. Who would suspect his wife, the woman who had been keeping vigil by his bedside, of being the one to end his life? The fateful night. Willow waited for her moment with the patience of a predator. She watched the hospital routines, noting when the nurses changed shifts, when the doctors made their rounds, when Drew's room was most likely to be empty, except for the patient himself. She had acquired the syringe and the substance. She needed something that would finish what she had started. Something that would stop Drew's heart or suppress his breathing, ending his life before anyone could intervene. When the moment came, Willow moved with purpose. The hospital corridor was dimly lit, the night shift in full swing, but with staff spread thin across multiple floors. She slipped into Drew's room, her heart pounding but her hands steady. This was it, the moment that would secure her freedom and silence the one person who could destroy her. Drew lay in the bed tubes and monitors surrounding him, his body still fighting the effects of the stroke she had given him. He was helpless, completely at her mercy. Willow approached the bedside syringe in hand, her mind focused on the task ahead. She reached for Drew's neck, the syringe poised to deliver its deadly payload. In seconds, it would all be over. In seconds, her secret would be safe forever. Scout's devastating discovery. What Willow didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that she wasn't alone. Scout Kane Drew's young daughter had come to the hospital to visit her father. Perhaps she couldn't sleep worried about her dad lying in that hospital bed. Perhaps she wanted to sit with him, to hold his hand, to tell him she loved him, even if he couldn't respond. Whatever brought her to the hospital that night, Scout arrived at the worst possible moment, or perhaps the best possible moment, depending on your perspective. As Scout approached her father's room, she saw through the doorway what was happening. She saw Willow standing over Drew's syringe in hand. She saw Willow's intent, the determination in her posture, the way she held that needle aimed at Drew's neck. Scout understood immediately what she was witnessing. This wasn't medical care. This wasn't a nurse tending to a patient. This was something terrible, something evil. No. Scout's scream tore through the quiet hospital corridor. Stop. Get away from him. The sound of Scout's voice shattered Willow's concentration. She froze the syringe still in her hand, caught in the act. For a split second, their eyes met, Willow's wide with shock and fear, Scout's filled with horror and betrayal. The walls close in. Scout's screams brought immediate attention. Other doctors and nurses rushed into the room, drawn by the desperate sound of a child's terror. They burst through the door to find a scene that would be seared into their memories forever, Willow standing over Drew's bed, syringe in hand. Scout crying and pointing at her stepmother with accusation clear in her tear-streaked face. She was going to hurt him. Scout cried. She was going to inject him with something. I saw her. The medical staff took in the situation instantly. Willow still held the syringe. There was no way to hide it, no way to explain it away. Her position, her posture, the timing of Scout's arrival, it all painted an undeniable picture. One of the doctors immediately moved between Willow and Drew's bed, protecting the vulnerable patient. Another gently guided Scout away from the traumatic scene, comforting the frightened child, while simultaneously taking note of everything she said. A third doctor carefully took the syringe from Willow's hand, preserving it as evidence. Willow tried to speak, tried to form some explanation that would make sense of what they were seeing. I was trying to help him. I'm a nurse. I know what he needs. But the words rang hollow. No one was buying it. The syringe she had been holding wasn't part of Drew's prescribed treatment. Her presence in the room at that hour, the furtive way she had entered Scout's terrified accusations, it all added up to something sinister. No escape this time. Hospital security was called immediately, followed quickly by the Port Charles Police Department. Detective Dante Falconeri arrived on scene within minutes, taking statements from the witnesses and securing the evidence. The syringe would be tested to determine what substance Willow had intended to inject into Drew. Security footage would be reviewed to track Willow's movements throughout the evening. Most damning of all was Scout's eyewitness testimony. The young girl, still shaking from what she had witnessed, told the police exactly what she had seen Willow standing over her father with a syringe aimed at his neck, clearly intending to inject him with something. Combined with the physical evidence and the statements from the medical staff who had witnessed the aftermath, there was no way for Willow to escape the consequences this time. No jury would acquit her. No lawyer could spin this into self-defense or accident. She had been caught red-handed attempting to murder her incapacitated husband in his hospital bed, witnessed by his own daughter. Willow was arrested on the spot, handcuffed, and read her rights while the medical staff continued to care for Drew and comfort the traumatized Scout. As police officers led her away from the hospital, Willow's carefully constructed world crumbled completely. The poison she had used on Drew, the shooting she had somehow escaped accountability for it, would all come to light now. Investigators would look deeper into Drew's stroke, questioning whether it had been truly natural or induced by foul play. The aftermath. The news spread through Port Charles like wildfire. Willow Tite, once considered a victim of Drew's manipulation, once acquitted of shooting him in what many believed was justifiable anger, had been caught attempting to murder him in his hospital bed. The community that had sympathized with her, that had understood her rage at Drew's betrayals, now looked at her with different eyes. This wasn't about anger or justice anymore. This was cold-blooded murder, or attempted murder, at the very least. This was a woman who had decided that the easiest way to protect herself was to permanently silence the man who could expose her crimes. Scout, the innocent child who had witnessed her stepmother's darkest moment, would carry the trauma of that night for the rest of her life. She had saved her father, but at the cost of her own innocence. The girl who had already lost her mother, Sam McCall, to tragedy, now faced the reality that the woman who had married her father was a would-be killer. For Drew, if he eventually recovered enough to understand what had happened, the knowledge would be devastating. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted to care for him in his most vulnerable state, had tried to end his life. The stroke that had left him helpless had been her doing, and she had returned to finish the job. Justice finally served. In a small interrogation room at the Port Charles Police Department, Willow sat in silence, the weight of her actions finally catching up with her. There would be no miraculous acquittal this time. No sympathetic jury would see her as a victim. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible, and the crime undeniable. She had poisoned Drew, causing his stroke. She had attempted to murder him in his hospital bed. She had done it in front of his daughter, scarring the child in ways that might never fully heal. As the sun rose over Port Charles the next morning, one thing was crystal clear. Willow Tate's reign of desperation and violence had finally come to an end. She would face justice for her crimes, and this time there would be no escape. The woman who had once been seen as a victim had become the villain of her own story. And Port Charles would never forget the night. Scout's scream saved her father's life and exposed the darkness that had consumed Willow Tate. Completely